everyone, I'm Edward Wagoner, 40 years in our industry, 20 as a CIO, and I may geek out a little bit because I'm up here with Adam, who is not from our industry. He's from one of the big tech companies working on the technology we're all excited about. Adam, introduce yourself, and I'm loving the conversation we're going to have.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Adam Champy. I'm the Chief Product Officer of VTS, most recently joining from the likes of Google, where I led significant amounts of AI initiatives on searching and understanding the physical world.
So what was so cool was learning that some of the technology I used and I'm excited about, you actually helped build, and not being from our industry, bringing that fresh viewpoint. I know you've been to so many tech conferences, but I think this is your first real estate conference. So what are your first impressions, and what are you seeing here at Realcomm?
So it's been exciting to be here. I think there's three things that parallel the outside world and one that's unique to real estate. In particular, I think what you're seeing here, as well as you saw at kind of Google I/O's conference, Microsoft's conference yesterday, is that AI is having a real impact on business. There's actually been a fundamental step change between what people expected might happen last year in these similar discussions and what people essentially are relying on today in production within their teams. The second is honestly the data. The data that we're working with is meaningful and at scale. It's not just kind of little pilots and demos. We're actually, again, putting things into production. And then unique to real estate, honestly, I love the data complexity and the people complexity of this space. Everything from having to deal with, is a broker have access to the right data? How do we understand deal data? And then how do we take that through the life of a building? We're starting to really make real connections, and you see that with the folks that are out in the room today.
So you're 6 weeks into the real estate industry, and that was a pretty accurate description of a lot of the challenges that we face and deal with. And I know we like to think that we're unique, and you talked about the uniqueness of real estate and the data. So help me understand, just with what you've seen so far, why do you think the corporate real estate data matters so much for AI to work? And what are you seeing that's maybe different or challenging from some of the other projects you've seen or worked on?
Well, I think it's important to unpack that question and ask, where is AI going to work? Is AI going to work in efficiency, or is it going to help you make better decisions to improve the return and the impact of your assets? Either in acquiring new assets, or maximizing the value of the assets you have, or making decisions in the later stage of a relationship with a tenant or with another counterparty. And I think what's really unique about our data is that it's naturally unstructured, and it's also relatively sparse. We don't have a ton of events in our space. We don't have millions of users coming into our products. We have a lot of individual deals or a lot of individual decisions that have to be right, because the impact of them has longitudinal kind of capacity, meaning like the choices you make have years-long impact, everything from the rent to the rights or options that you engage with somebody else.
So I love everything you said, and it's so accurate where you talked about the challenges that we have and the opportunities. But let's take a pause for a moment and think about how we've historically approached our data. So I know you're new to the industry, but for my 20 years, the majority of the time was looking in the past. What happened, last month? How many deals did we close? How many work orders were called in? What leases expired? So what does it look like when we start moving to more accurately and actively predicting what may happen? And
Yep.
How are you approaching that?
I mean, openly, the problem at VTS we try to solve is helping people in the moment of a value impacting decision, usually in the early stage or through the deal life cycle. How do you actually choose to make a decision that is forward-looking? And that requires data that's predictive. It requires data that is actually structured. So across that entire landscape of seeing kind of complexity, you actually have to start to structure and make connections. So for example, we've seen about 3.4 million entities, like tenants, show up in our system. But we've been able to simplify that down to actually recognize that it's only about 500,000 actual companies. And so if you're trying to make connections to even know the relationship that you have with a counterparty, you need to know who you actually have a relationship with to make a better decision, let alone to be able to do longitudinal analyses or second order type outputs that we're really asking our AI systems to do, and not just the demos that are based on kind of pulling some data out of the accounting or backward-looking systems.
And we talked yesterday when we were talking, one of the big challenges that many of us know in the industry is, you know, what do we call this building? Some people would say it's the San Diego Convention Center. Some people would say, you know, an engineer may say, well, this is Hall H main stage because they're down into the details. And you were talking about how with that unstructured data using AI, we get away from the way that we used to have to sync that data up, and you can actually eliminate some of those challenges that we've historically had.
Yeah, if you think about this industry, and you spend a lot of time with your other folks in the industry, a lot of what happens is you ask a question, like what's our relationship with this tenant? Or how do we project a set of comps that and versus this particular deal? Those comparisons matter of what you're talking about. And the specificity we represent as structure. When we talk about it in the technical side of things. And so when you think about having chat systems or AI systems where you're talking, or you're having agents that are working on top of that data, if you at every turn of an agent or every turn of a chat have to re-add structure, you're putting a lot of burden on each one of those agents to do that instead of actually working on a business-centric problem. And then if you have to get that structure right across every stage of the question, you can't go after the second order and high impact things that an agent really should be working on.
So wish this technology was around back when I was having those problems. And I think about the way people are reacting to some of the new technology, and some of it's the same reactions we've always had. There are people that will say, I've already got my system of record, I'm just going to layer some AI on top. And then there's and I was at one time one of those, I have to build this myself. Nobody will understand or be able to do it. So talk a little bit about, and I know this now, there's some hidden costs that you don't always realize when you take those approaches. So talk a little bit about both of those approaches and what people might miss and to be aware of as they're thinking about this.
I think, you know, this is, if you're a builder, this is kind of a dream moment. You've heard on stage for the last 2 or 3 days, people talking about what they're able to build out of the box with an LLM. And it's actually incredibly impressive. You're able to have these write code, you're able to make demos, but when you're starting to actually get into, okay, how will this run over time, or openly the amount of tokens that you've spent to do that building, it's not free. And then also you can build yourself into corners. So you might say, I can do this one problem, but I can't connect that to something else. So for a good example, if I'm trying to build something that understands, you know, how to clear rights or options, and I can't connect it to the same system that understands the financial impact or the calculations that might value that, you start to say, I can build lots of individual silos. And a good example is, and many of us in the room or online, we have kids, or we still also personally play with Legos. And if you've ever built a Lego set, sometimes you have Lego blocks that are like really unique to that specific box. And it's like, cool, that will be great for that problem. And one of the things that these AI systems are doing, or in particular the LLMs, is they will solve the problem you ask them to solve. But they're often not thinking about the next order or the next aspect to build. And at VTS, what we're doing is we're building a data structure that enables us to go after the different orders of complexity of problems, but then also the infrastructure that connects that to the mix of people and actors that make this industry so unique.
So let's project a little bit. Let's just say we're going to have you back in Tampa next year.
Sure.
Let's talk about what's next. A lot of people are thinking about AI as just making some of their workflows faster. But talk about fundamentally what's possible and what you think we're going to see. And maybe we'll come back on stage next year and see how those predictions played out and what your new predictions are.
Yeah, I think predicting AI is a dangerous game, but it's also, I think, become much more realistic. I've been, you know, in the hall, and people have come up to me and asked, here's what I dream of. And we actually say our data or our capabilities actually make some of these things possible. And so what we're starting to see is a horizon of 6 to 9 months where AI systems are truly going to be extending your workforce. And when I say extending, it's tasks that you may not have had time to do, like having outreach to somebody and get more data on your behalf, or things that where it's like, I really wish I had complete data in this space. Well, actually, we can have AI that just processes and abstracts that content for you so it's ready. And so what you're going to see over the next 6 to 9 months is moments where you have touch points where you say that wasn't possible before AI. And in particular, if you think about this, we have the same kind of moment going on where, if you remember MapQuest, kind of navigating here versus when you had Google Maps and it would tell you like the routing time. You're going to have a shift from something that helps you with information and maybe a little bit of speed to something that helps you with actual decisions and choices. And the ability to, again, when I describe a second order problem, it's helping you explore what happens if I do something, not just pulling data out of a system and saying, okay, cool, I simplified a report. And so we're going to see a lot of impact of what I would describe the decision-making moment and instrumenting the moments with AI-based insight.
So last question, and we'll make this quick. Real estate, historically as an industry, is very slow to change. What do people watching this need to do over the next 3 years to take advantage of this? And what do you think will separate those who win from those who don't?
I would say approach AI and approach our space with a fundamental sense of curiosity, not just in your work, but also, honestly, as you engage AI outside of work. There's moments where you should also challenge, could I do this faster? Or if I could do this faster, I had an army of agents or bots, could they take care of this for me? So challenge yourself, be curious, but it's also a very exciting time.
So Adam, I have to say, 25 years ago at the first Realcomm, we could not get the attention of the big techs that were there then. And now to sit on stage with someone from big tech that's joined our industry, it's an incredible, exciting time. I so look forward to the journey ahead of us and all of the accomplishments people will have with AI. Thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate it as well.